Commissioner Gardner, we are live.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Ashland Park and Recreation Commission September 1st, 2021 study session. And we are meeting electronically tonight. And the reason for this meeting tonight is to kind of go over, recap some of the messages that we received from the joint meeting of August 23rd, 2021. It was a joint meeting with the Ashland City Council and Ashland Park and Recreation Commission. And I felt it would be an opportune time to kind of recap what was said, what progress, if any, we made, comments from commissioners, and just general feedback regarding that meeting. I think it's, I guess if it was possible, we'd probably all like to get in a room and just sit around and look at each other and try to determine what happened, what's going to happen, what we can make happen, what we can help happen, all those things. But to meet as a group, as we all know, we need to meet in public. So that's kind of the format that's going to be tonight, different than many study sessions where staff usually presents a draft memo of what we're going to talk about and might even lead the discussion. This is going to be more, at least the beginning of the meeting is going to be more from just commissioners and comments, and trying to make sure that we're all on the same page moving forward to when we get to the second item on our agenda, which is the kind of revisiting our number one goal, which is the long-term sustainable funding. So I would just caution us as we speak to, and that's really where staff will help us. If there's comments that are made, on specific items, costs, expenses, anything like that, let's just make sure that that we're accurate in what we're saying, and realizing that obviously the public is either watching us now or can watch the proceedings at any time. So just kind of want to make sure we're aware of that. So I just kind of wanted to kick it off by saying that although we had what I would almost say joint meeting in quotation marks with the city council, I don't know that any of the park commissioners were satisfied with the progress that we made in that meeting. And I think there's several questions that are still out there that need to be answered. And from anyone that viewed any of the email traffic back and forth between counselors and myself, I sent them a message when their draft agenda for next Tuesday, the 7th of September, came out, and it appeared that they were going to continue on with the discussion of the August 23rd meeting, but they were going to continue it on without the Park and Recreation Commission. And I just expressed, and I expressed from the commission, and I sent it from the commission, I hope everyone is okay with that, really, we didn't get to some of the meatier items that we thought we needed to get to on the 23rd. And I expressed to the counselors that I just thought it was inappropriate that they would move forward without somehow bringing us to the table to continue that discussion, or at least be part of the discussion. I'm not sure we're going to make it back to the table, but the feedback that I got from the individual counselors were that some of them felt that was a legitimate concern from our part. So they have postponed any deliberation on the continuing the efforts of that 23rd meeting. It's now out to, I think, the 21st of September, and it might be in a little different form or fashion, and Michael Black might even be able to talk to that at some point as well. But anyways, so I didn't really say anything there other than I'm concerned that we weren't able to discuss with the council some of the most important features of moving forward with a sustainable funding source for APRC. And I guess I'd like to hear any other comments from other commissioners to kind of get the ball rolling. I'd even look to Commissioner Eldridge or Lewis to any thoughts on what's transpired since that Monday before last. Go ahead, Jim.
Some of the council emails that I've read are interesting. The questions that were raised at the joint meeting were about how parks fits into the city's system, and who actually raised the question of using the food and beverage revenue to fund more of parks and allow the city to have some more of the property tax millage. And after reading what the city manager was saying about that, it was pleasing to hear from him that, hey, we're not nefarious, which is the kind of a social media position that you read in town. And so but how we fit into parks, I think he still has a lot of research to do to actually see how the city is set up. And I guess we need to be at the table in some form, whether we're invited collectively or not. We have to have staff show up for all these meetings and justify our existence continually, obviously, because it seems by the emails I read, there's just a very large amount of demonizing of parks on social media, and it seems like it's just ill information or malinformation, or I'm not even sure what word to give it. But the more we can refute some of these attacks on how we take care of business, like what is our ending fund balance? You know, there was some discrepancies between the two. Well, I tend to listen to staff instead of people who write into these social media sites. So I'd like to hear some refuting of some of the so-called facts that have come out on some of these emails. So that would be some of my questions.
Any comments, Commissioner Eldridge?
Yeah, I think the huge turnaround of staff in City Hall is maybe a big reason why a lot of this confusion is occurring, and it's a shame that we lost some of the whatever institutional knowledge we had before that. And so that was a frustrating part of the meeting for me, because I realize that I am still getting up to speed on my position as a Parks Commissioner, and there are several city councilors that are in that position as well. But then, you know, now we have the positions of Gary Milliman and Allison Kahn. So, and I think they're doing a great job. It's just very frustrating to have them figure out what was done beforehand. And I share your, I don't know, bummed outness, Commissioner Lewis, on the negativity and the villainizing that has been going on. And, you know, all of us have been getting some pretty negative emails and accusations, and yeah, it's just surprising to me. And it's sometimes I get a little frustrated because I'm not sure that I don't know how to communicate to people that have decided that we are corrupt villains. So yeah, that's sort of things I've been thinking about. I'm still learning a lot about the budget and listening, and I will continue to do so.
I think it's important that as we move forward, there's several user groups in town that rely on this group, staff, and the commissioners to meet some of the goals that that individual user groups bring to us, whether it's the past action of tennis groups, whether it's the pool folks, whether it's the biking community, whether it's the hiking community. We play an integral part with all those user groups, and I feel that at some point it's sooner rather than later. I mean, it could be effective tonight. Is we need to initiate their participation in the value side of what we're trying to do, and what we've done with the funds that have come to APRC over the years, and also to get some of the messages out that I know Commissioner Lund has tried to put out there regarding something like East Main Park, where the comments are, why now, why this, why growing, the being accused of being empire builders, at the last meeting. The important part is to look at the history of the parks in that particular neighborhood and explain to the citizens. I mean, I think the local citizens know they had a park that wasn't able to be utilized. We sold that park. We bought some other property to replace that park. We then sold that park to Housing Authority of Jackson County for low-income housing, which seems to come up around parks and property all the time. And then, really negotiated for a reasonable deal on a replacement park for that particular part of town that could have the amenities that many user groups, community gardeners, dog park users, skills park bikers, all those can see the value of what we're doing, and it's not growth and maintenance that we can't handle. It's a replacement park, and it might be the last park we build out for several years, but the fact is there's a reason why we're doing that, and we need to continue to get that word out, and hopefully get the support of the user groups that will be using those facilities and are using them, whether it's upgraded pickleball facilities that I've been told by several users will be the best facility in the valley. I mean, those kind of things are valuable, and hopefully the community will hear those stories and hear those endorsements, and be willing to look at parks in that light. Mr. Eldridge?
One of the themes that I feel that I'm hearing over and over from folks writing in or the public is not actually from any of folks that I socialize with and kids at school and like parents at school and things like that, but this feeling that somehow APRC is not being transparent with their numbers and their financial statements. And I guess I would ask, it sounds like maybe a change has been made on the APRC website to make those monthly financials more easy to access by the public. It would be great if we could give that information out, because I know a lot of folks were writing in saying they couldn't figure out, why are these things not available? Why can I not see them? And then also, I understand that our financials get sent to the city services and they're like lumped together. But is there anything that we can do or work with the city to make those more transparent so that it's very clear and very obvious to folks what is going on with the budgeting and how we are spending our money.
So, can I respond to that?
Yes, you can.
So, first of all, I think transparent although that word has been thrown around a lot, is not the correct word. There's nothing but transparency in the processes that we've done and in all of our records. The initial email was, and this came over several years ago as well, was purporting to report us or the Parks Commission for not following the charter. And the charter states that the Parks Commission will file a monthly report with the city recorder so that the city recorder can make that available to whoever, and yada, yada, yada. And, so initially the complaint was we were violating the charter. Well, that's just not true at all. The reports are with the city. The reason why the charter states that is because there was a time before Measure 50 when Ashland Parks and Recreation received its funding separately and did all of its financing and everything separately. So in order to provide the transparency, I think the people who crafted the charter thought, well, the city council would be a good clearinghouse for people to go to, or the city recorder would be a good clearinghouse so people can review and see what the Parks Commission is up to month. Now, the way it works now is, as you said, the city does our finances. So our finances are as transparent as the city's finances are, and are as available as the city finances are. What we do with Ashland Parks and Recreation is we do a quarterly budget review with the Parks Commissioners, and those are all done in the public. They're actually reviewed in 2 public meetings, one with the City Council, and they review our budget and their budget. It's all one big package that they review, even though our funds are different, but it's all in one document. And then the Parks Commissioners also review the same document and review the same information that the finance director sends over regarding our budget and the City Council's budget. So it's reviewed in 2 meetings. As far as making things more available on the website, I think everything, and Tara, if you can help with this, I wouldn't mind the help, but I believe the email that went out, or the memo that went out from the city manager, explained how you can actually get real-time information off of the city's website right now. Anybody, the city invested in this program, and I'm blanking on the name, but I think it's OpenGov or something like that. OpenGov, where people can go in and they can get real-time information, and they can customize the information that they want. They can say, I want to see what the Parks Fund is up to, or the Vehicle Fund is up to, or the CIP Fund for Parks versus Public Works, and things like that. And they can actually get real-time information. I think I don't at this point, I don't think doing anything more is really necessary. I think explaining to people how the current process, or how to access the information, is what we should be doing, as opposed to creating a new format for accessing the information that already exists somewhere else. And Tara, do you have anything you want to add to that? Is it real time, or is it's by month at least?
It's by month, so it's the previous month. It is not real time for so it's what the latest month would be.
Right. So it's monthly, and it might be a month behind, because that's how finance is done until the month is over and we reconcile and everything, and then it gets finalized. It doesn't actually get uploaded, but it is the most real-time data that is available. And when this program was purchased and when the program was enacted, the idea was that it was being enacted as a transparency tool. And I'm going to take back transparency as a user-friendly tool to provide information that was accessible before, and in my opinion was transparent before, but was a little bit harder to get to because you had to ask for it on paper, or you had to fill out a form or something like that, or or just, settle for the budget information, not the expense month by month. So I think this tool is supposed to be the user-friendly tool that everybody was envisioning, and giving people the opportunity to see what they wanted to see in what really is real time. It's the most current information, I'll say, I guess. So
can I add something real
Sure.
quick? Leslie, you said something about our funds being in with the city funds. I just want to be very clear that the parks has 3 funds. We have an operating fund, an equipment fund, and a CIP fund. And when the budget is created, through the whole budget process that is adopted by the Parks Commission and the City Council, those funds stay in those accounts, and they are not intermingled in any way with any other funds. They are our funds, and they are just tracked by the finance department. And of course, internally, we track them very closely.
Thank you. I had a follow-up question about OpenGov, if that's what it's called. Well, did I see something on the traffic with the financial director? Was it Gary Milliman who said that it's not as user-friendly as had been hoped, or?
Well, it says user-friendly as the internet is. I think there are websites that are really intuitive, like Google. Okay, Google knows what you're thinking before you do a lot of the times, right? And because they, all kinds of reasons. But with this website, what's that?
Because they're listening to everything.
That's right. That's right. But with this website, you do have to go in and you have to make choices. So to say it's not user friendly, I don't think is accurate. It has the capability and was the best tool at the time to get the most comprehensive information to the public at their fingertips. So it's as user friendly as anything else, and in my opinion, is way more user friendly than having to call somebody and say, I'm looking for this information, could you print it off, and then having to fill out a FOIA request or pay for the copies or something like that in order to get it, or have to drive down to City Hall to get it. So I although you have to make a lot of choices and click here and click there and click here and click there and that kind of stuff, I do believe it's still user friendly. It just can't read your mind and tell you what you want to see before you tell it what you want to see.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out myself, but I do appreciate that. It might also be somewhat generational. Not everyone in this town has been using computers their whole lives, and sometimes they can be a little challenging.
I'll call on Commissioner Lant next, but welcome Commissioner Bell to the meeting. I'm glad you could make it. Thanks for making time. And I just want to add to, and Michael, you might correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I saw an email from City Manager Pro Tem Milliman saying that Finance Director Khan was going to start uploading those reports to the city website.
Yeah.
And
so
seemed to think that it wasn't a lot of extra work for them, and it would be easily available.
Yeah. So the difference would be the reports would be as they wouldn't be customized at all. They would just have all the information for all the departments, all the funds by month that would be uploaded in one PDF document, where OpenGov, you can actually drill down further and narrow your search and get information more specific to what you're looking for. But yes, I guess I do remember that is going to happen, and so there will be something in a PDF that the public will be able to access as well.
Right. So for anyone watching, that that should be available on the city website in the very near future. I will turn it over to Commissioner Lant.
Thank you. I want to go back to East Main Park just for a second, and want to remind everyone that we had the YMCA park that was really not very useful because of the deed restrictions and the way it was mostly used by the YMCA rather than the public. But it was a community park. It was a neighborhood park. and it functioned as a neighborhood park. And when it went away, we made a promise to the neighbors, which was, we're going to replace it. And that's what we did. So that's just an example of APRC keeping our promise. And I think that that's important for us to acknowledge and to feel good about.
Commissioner Bell?
You may have also already mentioned this, but East Main Park was also purchased with the money that was generated by the sale of the YMCA park. So it was kind of a one-to-one transfer. It wasn't a new purchase. It was an exchange of an existing asset, you might say.
Yes. Good point. Other comments from commissioners? Commissioner Lewis?
Not to change the subject, but the email that came from the mayor about the potential agenda items was changing the food and beverage allocation. Does it need to go to the voters? Holding property tax allocation at $1.89 for parks. And then the one that really caught my attention was a possible charter change discussion around parks. Allow separate taxing entity or folding parks in under the city authority. I'd like to hear what other commissioners feel about that particular part of the potential agenda item. And if we could send staff, because this is all going to be happening next week, and we probably are not going to be attending in any virtual way. But staff will be there. So I just feel it's kind of an interesting discussion about the city charter.
You know, I mentioned something about that earlier in the meeting, but I'll turn it over to Director Black. Maybe you can clarify that.
Okay. So yeah, if this were to come up as an agenda item, I definitely would be there. But from what I understand, the city manager is working on a proposal, and he's involved the finance director and city attorney. And we talked today at length, and he said that he will also involve me going forward in the recommendations that he's making. Now, ultimately, they're his recommendations. So I appreciate his willingness to involve me and to listen to my feedback. But I haven't seen those yet. He's preparing the proposal that would touch on a lot of these things that the mayor had bulleted out, but he's doing that for the 21st of September. And I believe that meeting that will be talking about this and other departments, it's not just parks, it's other departments. That meeting will be happening on September 21st. Now, some of the things to, I guess, keep in mind are that he's going to be talking about the entire general fund. From my understanding, where I'm sitting and what I gathered today and talking to him, his memo isn't just about parks, but it will be addressing the financial situation of the general fund, which then has to do with parks and recreation. What it says, I don't know yet, and I'm looking forward to getting a copy of it and having an opportunity to comment on it. But I don't think there will be a meeting on the 7th with this item on the agenda. Or let me rephrase that. I don't think this item will be on the 7th, on the agenda for the 7th.
Right. So just to clarify, at least the information I received is that those particular items won't be discussed on the 7th. We're not sure what's going to be discussed on the 21st. So any of these items could be wrapped into Pro Tem City Manager Milliman's report to the City Council. I'll go ahead and take Leslie first and then Jim.
I'll pass.
Okay. Jim?
I still want to get back to the charter issue, and I don't know, like I say, if there's any talk about removing the parks from the charter, I think that should catch our interest, and we should actually think about that and see the advantages and disadvantages. And so each commissioner should kind of run that through, whether it's discussed at the 7th or the 21st, doesn't really matter. But, you know, we really want to think about that beforehand, so we're kind of prepared to say how we feel about that, because you know, maybe it's counter to my thoughts, is that removing parks from this charter would be detrimental to parks, I think. And you know, that's our duty, and I think that's what's lost in all this, is we as commissioners are proxies for the community to make sure we have a well-run park system, and that's our duty. And it's nice to see the council discussing things like how other communities work, but we're a somewhat semi-autonomous group within our city, which is different than Roseburg or Klamath Falls. And so it'd be nice to educate some of the counselors about why we are different, and if we want to continue to be different, or do we want to change what we do in and how we work. But our job is to keep a well-run parks going, and I guess that I didn't see a lot of that at the joint meeting about understanding of we are here to lobby for parks. And so it seemed like there's a lot of talk of that we're selfish, but we're not selfish. We're just negotiating for a good park system. And so it shouldn't be surprising to people that we speak out in favor of parks and what we do. And I think we've justified a lot of our reason for being, but I still maintain people don't move here because we have an excellent police department or fire department. They move to Ashland because of the schools, the parks, the amenities, the recreational opportunities, the educational opportunities. It's kind of surprising that how little respect we've been getting from certain groups in town. And I think Commissioner Gardner mentioned the user groups. I would agree. We want to get back to them and explain to them the situation we could potentially be in. And we just got to continue to lobby, and whether we're at the virtual meeting or not, get staff there, send emails, do whatever we can do to just promote parks and justify our existence, you know. So some comments about the charter, I think it'd be interesting.
Yeah, well, you know, but I would say, you know, and it was brought up possibly in the meeting on the 23rd. You know, several parts of the city charter are somewhat antiquated. I mean, 1908 and the vote of the people there, you know, it might be a little different than today, but you know, the fact is it's in the city charter. A change to the charter is generally a pretty major move. And I think there would be a lot of discussion. You know, it isn't something that the city council would determine in a single meeting or anything like that. I think there would be, there's pros and cons to every, you know, to every suggestion someone might make. And I believe that would be a heated discussion on changing the city charter with regards to parks or really any other part, you know, elected bodies. There's some talk around the city recorder and, you know, things like that. So those will be similar to the discussion that went on for well over a year on changing from city administrator to a city manager. I mean, you know, there was a lot of debate and a lot of discussion. There was definitely two sides to the argument, and I would suggest that any proposed charter change would basically follow that same line of reasoning, you know, that it would be a major shift, and there's many components that would need to be discussed and debated. Other comments from commissioners regarding that? Commissioner Eldridge, go ahead.
Unrelated, but so you were talking about the memo that the city manager is preparing, and it just pardon if this is an ignorant question, but so the adopted biennium budget has now been blown apart and it's being renegotiated and reconsidered, and is that essentially what's going on? Or
I wouldn't say it's been blown apart, but it appears as though it's under review again. The city council takes recommendation from the Citizens Budget Committee on a budget. They did that, and the city council is under. They actually did adopt the budget too, but they're under no obligation to stick to that budget. They actually can amend the budget during the year or during the biennium, whatever the financial period is. Or they could even go with a different, before they adopt it, they could change it from what the recommended budget was from the Citizens Budget Committee. So from my perspective, again, what it appears and what I've heard from city councilors and the city manager is that the general fund is under review. And part of that is actually in the adopted budget, where the councilors had stated that they wanted to cut $1 million out of the second year of the budget, and so on and so forth. So to some extent, yeah, it is being reviewed and could change. It's not the entire budget, though; it's the general fund, and I believe that this was the plan when the budget was adopted.
thanks.
Basically, there's decisions to be made by the city council prior to the second year of the biennium. I mean, as Michael said, we're probably not even locked into the first year, but the first year has started. The budget was balanced, put forward. Parks worked out their budget. We should expect to get what the city council agreed to through the first year, but the second year of the biennium is not so clear. And during the next 6-8 months before the next biennial, the second year of the biennium budget starts, that's the discussion right now, is what's it going to look like? Is it are they going to reconcile and move forward with the 98% of food and beverage to parks, and then an agreement on how much of the general fund comes to us to make the $1.89, or are they going to come up with a different scheme? It's really unclear right now, to me anyways, and which that was my hope, that we were going to get a clearer vision on August 23rd of which way the council was leaning, or what we could expect moving forward, so that we could basically make the plans and adjustments that we might need to make to follow those guidelines. But I mean, that's where we are right now, and hopefully sooner than later, we'll get an idea of what the second year is going to look like. Commissioner Bell?
So I guess partly to kind of respond to Jim or Commissioner Lewis's questions earlier, and also about the current budget process. So it seems to me that the reason that the Parks and Recreation Department has its own board of commissioners is to provide it with an autonomy from the city council on purpose, with the idea that it separates it gives us autonomy, but what that also means is it separates our finances and our direction from the city council generally, because the people that came before us decided that they really wanted Ashland to have a great set of parks, and they wanted it to have its standalone group of advocates. And I mean, at one time, they even intended for it to have its own taxation authority. And that I think has been of great benefit to Ashland, and has built Ashland into a community that is, maybe the gem of Southern Oregon, or at least a very nice place that many people have decided to live. And so I think the idea that the city council would sort of erase the board of commissioners and subsume the Parks Department into the city council's purview really violates the original intention of the charter, and I think it is part of a process that's going to lead to the undermining of the parks of Ashland generally, if that's the direction the city council intends to go in. And I don't think that that is actually what they're planning on doing. But the other thing that also strikes me is that, in light of the fact that in the past, Parks has had a lot of autonomy in determining its own finances, it does seem like perhaps what we ought to do is recognize that to maintain the parks as they currently are requires a certain level of funding. At the moment, at least, that's $1.89 per $1,000 of assessed property value, and come up with a deliberate strategy for how to get to that, regardless of whether that rubs some of our citizens the wrong way or is unpalatable to some parts of our community. I mean, I think that it's sort of our obligation to come up with, or maybe not our obligation, but I think it is in our directive or the intention of setting up a Parks Commission as a separate entity to come up with its own direction for ensuring that we have a stable funding source. And so, it seems to me that the city council, or perhaps the city staff, has previously said that we should perhaps have 98% of the food and beverage tax, but that's one strategy. But I don't know that we should just say, okay, well, we'll accept that until you come up with some better idea. It seems to me that maybe we should come up with our own idea of how to make this all work and propose that and follow that through. So that would be my suggestion on that.
Great, thanks for that. The one thing that we, the one caveat though is that we don't have the power of the purse at this point, which, I'm just saying that as, I'd like to think that we're not abdicating to the city council to decide the direction, but it does put us at quite a bit of a disadvantage by not having any say in how much, well, not any say, but not having the final word in how the parks, to what level parks are funded. What we do have is we have control and management of our budget once that's determined, but it's that front end that is somewhat of a stumbling point. Go ahead and follow up. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that we get to dictate the terms of our funding by any stretch of the imagination. I know that it's not up to us to figure out or to create our own funding. But what I'm suggesting is that it seems to be in our best interests to at least devise or propose a strategy that would actually maintain our the fundings that we have and create some financial stability for the Parks Department. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not for us to maybe say yes or no to the plan, but if we do our best to present City Council with the best possible plan and they say no, well, I guess that's for them to make that decision and everything. But I mean, we have done our due diligence and done our best work to try and make this whole process, to make the park successful, I guess, is what I think.
Right. Other comments along those lines or any others?
Just as far as process goes, I believe that a change to the charter, if it was initiated by the city council, would be a referral to the public, and the public would have to vote on any change to the charter. So just so it's clear, I just want to make sure everybody understood that the council would only refer a change to the public, not make the change themselves.
Okay. Any comments along those lines, Commissioner Lott?
I was just thinking about a lot of public comment that we're getting is that, there's a lack of accountability with parks. And I just wanted to point out that if instead of our current system, if it was just a Parks Department, there was no elected Parks Commission, that would mean that Director Black would be a department head. And so if somebody had an issue, they could go to City Council. City Council would then go to the City Manager, and the City Manager would then go to the Parks Director. But under the current system, the someone could come to a park commissioner, and the park commissioner would go to the parks director, Michael Black, or whoever the parks director was. The point is that there actually is, and this is what the beauty of what the citizens originally did in the charter, is they made actually parks especially accountable to the citizens, more so than any other part of the city. And I think that gets lost. I'm not quite sure why it isn't, that isn't understood better, but I think that's the reality, is that we are the accountable body. And just like the city council, if somebody is not happy with what they're doing, they can run for office and they can become part of it. They can do it, advocate for doing it a different way.
Good points. Mr. Eldridge.
Lost my mouse there for a second. Yeah, that is a great point. I appreciate you bringing that up. I'm thinking more about this, the user groups that you mentioned, Commissioner Gardner, and the need for more advocacy. And I'm just curious what kind of form that would take. Would that be mobilizing advocates to write to City Council? Because I agree. The reason why I'm here is, and the reason why I live in Ashland and why I love this town, has everything to do with the trails and the parks and all the families and all the people that come here and start businesses and all the people that bring wealth into this town and innovation and culture and youth and students that are coming in here. That's why they're here. It's the most important thing to me. And to everyone that I know. And I get around. I'm an SOU professor, and I know a lot of kids that go to school and do 1,000 things after school. I talk to people all day long. So yeah, what sort of advocacy do we need? Because I agree that all of these people that I interact with, the hundreds of people that I see on campus and that are in love with the outdoors and the parks in this town and love APRC, they're not as much in this conversation as they need to be, and out on the trails and the runners and the bikers. And what do we need from them? And is there something that we as commissioners can do to mobilize those advocates? Because I'd like to try.
Right. And Mr. Lamont, did you want to tag on that?
Well, I think we do need to keep in mind that at this point, there may be some difficult choices that do need to be made, and it isn't just that the city is just being mean or vindictive or whatever. It's that it's that there's some problems with the budget, and it has to do with a lot of things that are outside of the control of parks or the rest of the city. And that is that some expenses like health insurance and PERS are going up faster than what the cost of the 3% that property tax can go up. So I think we need to be aware that this isn't just that somebody's out to get parks. It's that the system is kind of pushing against all of city government, and so we need to try to figure out some solution that really works for everyone. And it may mean some tough choices, but at this point, I think the big problem is that we don't even know what it looks like. And we're 10 months away from the next fiscal year. And we do not at this point know how much money we're going to have for next year. And that's untenable. Frankly, it's irresponsible. We need to know ASAP what our situation is. And so we need to do everything we can to advocate for for parks and advocate for something occurring quickly, so we can do the planning the way a good government operates.
You know, I would just add to that, that I think it's been difficult to mobilize the user groups because it has been somewhat of a moving target, and we've been waiting for the target to be set so that we could focus on that and then have our advocates come to our aid in advocating for, you know, why we think we need this moving forward. But just what both Commissioner Eldridge and Lant just said or asked, you know, we're kind of at the point where we really need the advocates for parks to support us and to make their voice heard. And it's going to be incumbent upon us to get the word out, either to the individual groups or through whatever media you know that we choose to use to you know to get that word out. But I'm, you know, Director Black and I spoke briefly sometime over the last week of, you know, we might have to, you know, find when a user group is having a meeting and say, one of us needs to go and answer questions about parks, and, you know, make sure that they know that we're focused on meeting the reasonable needs that they, you know, that they expect us to meet, and that what we're trying to do to advocate for them and have them hopefully advocate for us as well is the way I see it. And it sounds maybe a little weird coming from an elected body, but since we don't hold, you know, we don't have the power of the purse, we really need to make it clear how important it is, what the service that we provide, the value that we provide to the community, how, you know, that it's out there and it needs to continue to be out there. If that makes any sense. But, Commissioner Lewis.
To pick up on Commissioner Lant's talk about the difficult choices. In 2008, I think a lot of us remember the giant financial disaster, and the property values were plummeting and people were losing their homes and all that. Well, our city administrator came to parks and not only asked us to reduce our budget, but gave us another ward, which was the senior center. And so we are always here to help the city with its financial issues. I don't know of one time when we've been selfish at all. We have taken a hit along with everybody else through these years. And 2008 was just one fairly important point in time when property taxes weren't flowing in and there was a real money flow issue. We were there to help, and we took it on, and we adapted and improvised. So that's what we've done all along this time. So how it came to the point where we're not pulling for the team in some way, I think is mistaken. And these this informational issues that come out, and we seem to be trying to defend ourselves continually from a few people in town who feel that in some way parks is part of this reason for this financial issue. I would like somebody to explain to me how parks at less than 10% of the total budget of the city, we didn't create the problem and we can't solve it on the backs of parks. So, you know, this is the reality of it. We've always been willing to do our part. And somebody tell me at some point where we said, no, we can't do this anymore. We have worked hard, sharpened the pencils. Staff's been amazing, I think. And my estimation is that they work out a budget for us and they make it work, and we make it more efficient, and we try to design our system to work better continually. And as every other department should do as well. And I'm sure they are, but like I say, public works, planning, all that, I don't know that much about, but I know that as a parks commissioner, I feel our system has always worked with the city, can-do attitude. We're here to help, but we still have a park system to run, and that's what we're lobbying for. And so I think that would take that back to the user groups and just say, yeah, there are some tough times and some tough decisions, but you're not going to solve it on the back of the parks budget. So yeah.
Thanks, Director Black.
So I just wanted to make an observation about the emails that you've been seeing. First of all, they're not going to you; they're going to the city council. Unless there are some other ones, I know I saw one recently about pickleball. It was very positive. That just went to you. The ones that are going to city council, I think, are more bent on the line of Ashland Parks and Recreation is kind of not doing well for whatever reason. I saw an email the other day about the upper duck pond, or yesterday, and the upper duck pond doesn't look good. It actually is in Lithia Park. It actually is generally a pond that fills with TID water, that's irrigation water, and then it's used to irrigate the park, and it constantly is moving. It's being filled up and drawn down at the same time. So it's constantly changing. But since TID shut off, long story short, it's not looking well. It's just not doing well. We haven't been draining it. And people are, I mean, I saw someone use that as a metaphor of Ashland Parks and Recreation in general. They can't even take care of their park. But really, there's a misunderstanding. We don't have the money to fill that pond up with culinary water, city water, in order to ensure that it looks good and is more clear. And once we fill it up, it's going to get stagnant after a period of time anyways, just because of the temperature and the fact that it's not moving and everything that's going on there. But so that's one thing I want to say is there's kind of a misunderstanding. And the other thing is I think before the city council ever makes a decision, it appears as if the tide is rising against Ashland Parks and Recreation by stating in advance that, well, Ashland Parks and Recreation has all of these problems, and the statement, a quote from somebody that we are not managing our budget well, which is not true. It is not true at all. All of our information is available to the public. And the fact is, we wouldn't even be able to be providing half the services. Well, a quarter of the services we're providing today, were it not for our very good budget management and our ability to reserve funds to use in this time when our funds have been reduced to a point that would have cut about a quarter of the services out of Ashland Parks and Recreation had we not managed well. So what I see is even before a decision is being made, and there will be a hard decision that has to be made, the city only has two choices: reduce expenses in the general fund or increase revenues in the general fund. Those are their two options. So they have some hard decisions to make. But what I'm saying is, before that decision even comes out, the decks are kind of getting stacked against us a little bit, because the only thing that the city council is hearing is, well, these negative emails that we've all seen. And I think we've responded to them. We try to respond to them, and frankly, I think it just kind of goes in a circle. It doesn't. I mean, we try to resolve the issue, but then it's always like, well, I don't trust you anyway, so it will never be resolved because of those trust issues. But so that's what I would say as far as advocacy and things like that go. It's not about saying we need more, or we need X or Y or whatever it is. Are there people out there who enjoy and value the system of parks that we have and recreation that we have? Because right now, If you're sitting at the city council and looking at the email, looks like most people in the city are just aren't happy with Ashland Parks and Recreation. And I don't think that's the case.
And I don't either. We've been talking for an hour on this item. I think both the two items that we had listed on our agenda tonight actually pretty much bleed together. If we could segue into item number 4, which is really our number one goal, which was a long-term stable funding moving forward. I believe that's what we need to advocate for. And that was, from my vantage point anyways, was what I was really hoping that we would get to the nitty-gritty in a discussion with the council when we met with them on the 23rd, is what would that look like? I think Commissioner Bell touched on it a little bit already tonight. You know, it's like, what does that look like going forward? What are the options? What are the possibilities? Where can we look to stabilize the funding for parks so that we can continue to support the incredible system that's been developed over the last 113 years since 1908. I mean, that's, I think that's why we're advocating, and that's why we want to be at the table with the city council when we move forward, trying to make these decisions, is what system will work for the city and for APRC to move forward. I mean, there's several options out there. I think each one of us probably has a concept in our head of what would be the optimum, what would be the best way to move forward. If the city just continued to fund us at 189, is that the best? Is a combination of food and beverage and some portion of the general fund the best way to move forward? Is a separate district, is that really a reasonable concept moving forward? What would citizens of Ashland agree to pay over and above what they currently pay to the city for their taxes if a separate district was developed? I mean, all those questions are out there. We have yet to advocate for really any of them. What we've been trying to do is track where the city budget is going so that we know how we're going to fund, as Commissioner Lund said, how we're going to fund ourselves in 10 months. I mean, we don't know. You can't just shut down the parks for a year while you try to decide what you're going to do and then think you're going to pick it up in 2023 and move forward. I mean, it doesn't work that way. We need to answer the questions. We need to solve the problem now as soon as possible. And there's options out there that it would be very beneficial, I think, to the city council, the city in general, if we were part of that discussion. And, I think that's what the message from us has been, what it needs to continue to be. And that might even be the message that the user groups that value the work that we've done and the facilities that we have, that might be the message that needs to go out there is, we don't know what that stable funding source looks like right now, but we need to figure it out pretty fast. And we need to have decisions made, and we need to have options on the table. And we hopefully need to be part of that conversation. And that's all I'll say to that for right now. I'll get off the soapbox for a second. Commissioner Eldridge, go ahead.
Okay, don't laugh at me. I keep thinking while you're talking about this, is there another way that APRC can bring money in to even have some funding stream that is separate or that is coming in through our services? And I'm sorry if this is a tangent that we don't want to go on, but I mentioned this to Rachel, and I don't understand why we do not pay, we not charge for parking in Lithia Park. And It would discourage locals from driving their cars. It goes well with our climate goals. And we could have a fairly large, I mean, I haven't really done the numbers, but I feel like it would be a decent amount of money, probably more than most of the revenue that we get from other recreation facilities rentals and stuff. Maybe it's just a drop in the bucket. I don't know, but I wonder why we don't start doing things like that. If it's, and again, I don't know, maybe Ashlanders would freak out at this notion. I'm not sure. I think it's very standard and I think it discourages driving, which is great. And then tourists that are using it are probably more than happy to pay 50 cents, $1 an hour to come to the park. But yeah, so that's why I started with Don't Laugh at Me, because maybe it's just a pittance, maybe it's nothing, but something I think about a lot.
You know, I can answer that. I mean, I can't answer it, but I could tell you that the whole parking issue in town is a huge topic. In fact, I was part of an ad hoc group that met a couple years ago prior to COVID, and it kind of fell apart during COVID. But there are many, just like everything else, there are many opinions on paid parking around the city, and so by no means, I think every stone should be, you know, turned over and looked and see what we can do. But I'll just throw out there that there's also a large pushback from merchants and other people that probably use the parking places in Lithia Park, you know, for their employee parking, you know, that tend to not like that concept. But that doesn't mean that it's far-fetched or not a, you know, not a better idea. I mean, you know, it's almost similar to upping the charge on every facility that we either currently don't pay for or don't charge enough for. You know, we've always tried to keep the parks as affordable and, you know, only charge for reasonable use. And you know, maybe that model doesn't work anymore. Maybe reasonable is out of the question, you know?
Well, I think, I mean, the trick is, right, is to have the burden of that revenue stream of like be more on out of towners than it is on locals. But I mean, I think of the same thing every time I'm driving up Ashland Loop Road to go to White Rabbit Trailhead. And in the spring and the fall, when the riding is great and the hiking is great, that parking lot is packed, the road is pitted, it's not being maintained. I realize that eventually, like very quickly, you're going into Forest Service land, but why do we not have to have like some sort of pay to go up there and use that parking lot? And it just seems like we get a lot of wonderful things for free. And most of the people that are, I think that a lot of folks that are coming to visit, I think there is potential to bring in more money through those streams. But yeah, it's a similar concept. I guess I'm saying maybe we need to internalize the cost more of what we provide.
Do you have time?
Any other questions or comments on that? Go ahead, Jim.
Another discussion point might be looking at a parks district that wouldn't burden the taxpayers, but it would carve out a guaranteed amount from the city's budget to guarantee us at least a somewhat of a stable funding source. I think it was Commissioner Lott mentioned that if we tried to not carve out some out of the budget, it wouldn't, a parks district, I don't think would fly when the taxpayers would be looking at a considerable increase in taxes. But I think what we're worried about is loss of the autonomy of our own funding. And how would a district look if we didn't burden the taxpayers and got back to the original intent of the charter, instead of getting rid of us in the charter to just give us more guaranteed autonomy, which was the function of the of being put in the charter in the first place. And, you know, a little sideline, I know this is this historic stuff I'm on to. The city band is in the charter as well. And if you love quaint and romantic things, that's a great thing to have a city band that's been around since the 1870s. And it was put into the charter in that 1908 as a guarantee. It even had its own millage. So I know there's a lot of towns in the United States that wish they had a city band, and we legitimized it in some way. It's just really the forward thinking of the people of Ashland back in the day. You've got to really respect some of that, and so you know, I guess just kicking out what would a Parks District look like that wouldn't burden the taxpayers.
Go ahead, Commissioner Bell.
It seems like we could maybe present a couple of different options, because there's a range of different choices between having Ashland voters approve an increase in their taxes effectively to pay for APRC on one end of the scale, and on the other end of the scale, it could be that APRC substantially increases the charges for all of its services to make us something more along the lines of a private enterprise with some city involvement. And, you know, in a way, I would say that it's kind of up to the voters or the residents of Ashland to make a decision about that. And either one of those is potentially viable. But I think what I do think would happen is if the taxpayers were no longer supporting a lot of our services, they would go away. And I think that it's all, you know, it sounds nice perhaps to think that we would be able to privatize one of our different services, but I think it would make them unaffordable, or it would just make them go away. I mean, the golf course would be a good example. I don't think the golf course will be readily privatizable, but it could be attempted. And, you know, and that would sort of answer the question of whether people are willing to support a golf course. Anyway, my point is not so much that that we should maybe necessarily pick that we are going to have an independent taxing district versus that we are going to become an almost entirely private organization, but perhaps we could present a range of different options to the city council who represent the voters, and then the city council could decide which of those things it thinks sounds the best. I guess along with maybe a range of different likely outcomes, including greatly reducing the services of the Parks and Recreation system if we go down the direction of privatizing things.
Thank you. Commissioner Lalonde, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, I want to point out that Jackson County has privatized, or at least has monetized its system, so that everything based in the system, it breaks even or better. And so they don't get any general fund funding from the county. What that means is that if somebody wants an amenity like in Jackson County, wants an amenity like Lithia Park, they come to Lithia Park. And so the city of Ashland and the APRC is actually subsidizing the county because the county doesn't have that kind of an option. And that's so it's so different to talk about, you know, a system that is self-sustaining without public money, and one that is. And ours is definitely, for the most part, it's a system that's built on public money for the public good.
Rachel, did you want to say something first, and I'll turn over to Director Black?
Sure. I just wanted to mention, I thought it was a good time when Commissioner Eldridge brought up, you know, parking in Lithia Park and fees and charges. And I think one of the things that we as staff have been working on, again, I'll mention it, is the cost recovery for the entire department. We've been working on this for, gosh, almost a year, since about last September. And it's more in depth than we've ever gone before. It includes all of our parks, all of our programs, all of our services. And we're getting closer. We're pushing ahead as quickly as we can. And we're getting to the point where we're going to be making some recommendations to Director Black, and we're going to help move this forward to the Parks Commission. So I just wanted to mention that we are looking at our programs and services and how much things cost, and what we can do. Is it raising fees? Is it looking at different options? So I just wanted to mention that.
Commissioner Bell, go ahead.
I was just going to say that there's also, I heard some talk about the idea that people are leaving Ashland because Ashland is getting to be very expensive, which I'm not saying is not true, but I also think that a lot of people would leave Ashland if the parks system got dismantled. And so, I think a lot of people, as Commissioner Eldridge has pointed out a couple of times, are here because of the parks and recreation systems that we have. And if those were dismantled, I think a lot of people would also leave because of that. And I think that those are people that Ashland doesn't want to have leave. So.
Right. Director Black, you had your hand up as well.
So I just wanted to say, a lot of this comes back to the charter and the question of what the charter says. And I just, I've been here for 7 years, but I'm curious if any of the commissioners know when the last time an in-depth analysis of the charter language was done, who did it, and what the result was. And I'm asking that because I think I don't know that anybody's in a position to say exactly what the charter language means in a sense that if somebody challenged it, you couldn't you couldn't say, well, no, that's not what it is, and succeed in an argument. I think it could be a good time to have a professional take a look at the charter and advise the Parks Commission kind of what the charter says, because Measure 50 happened. It did happen. And it was relayed to the Parks Commissioners that the result of Measure 50 was this. And from where I'm standing, all of the information that we have has all been relayed from another source. Has the Parks Commission ever gone out and sought answers to come directly back to the source of the Parks Commissioners and not through a third party?
Interesting idea. Commissioner Lewis?
It was maybe 10 years ago that there was a charter amending proposition floated, and I remember going as a Parks Commissioner, going to meetings to defend parks, and that's when I found out about the city band, and it had really to do with the city manager position. And I believe that amendment to the charter failed at that point, whereas this latest one was only about the city manager position. And so during these discussions, they said, well, it's like 7,000 words in our charter, and it's very wordy, and the average is 5,000 or 4,500 or something like that. And subjective things like that, who's to say what's wordy or not wordy, and what baggage is the charter carrying? There was a whole discussion about that. And luckily, people really thought the city band should stay in there and the park should stay in. And then even it was a complicated issue between what's the difference between an administrator and a manager is a pretty complicated thing in the way our structure was. And as it came out, we were slightly different. As it keeps coming up over and over. Ashland is definably different than a lot of communities. We can talk Roseburg, and we can talk Klamath Falls, and we can talk other communities of our size, but you really got to define what we're doing here and then decide, do we want to do it like they do it in California? Like a lot of these people are coming here deciding, well, we're doing it all wrong. You have to convince me that we're doing it wrong first. And for years, all this worked perfectly. Remember, the Gentle Persons Agreement. Anybody back, dredge that one up with Brian Almquist, and Measure 50 came in, but there was a guarantee that parks would be funded, and that worked really well until the council got into financial problems, and I don't know that we changed much. We just tried to do the best with what funding we had and the things that changed around us. So I see the city charter as kind of our protector, and yeah, I think Director Black has an interesting idea. We should all tonight go back and pull out the city charter and read all 7,000 words and try to digest some of that. I'm going to do that. So I must say I've nitpicked at it, but you know, like when you nitpick at something, you kind of cherry pick, so to speak. You pick out the stuff that you'd like to see, just like the comprehensive plan. I've used that liberally of just highlighting the stuff that works for me and ignoring the stuff that may not. So I don't know. The city charter is something that is a legal document, and I guess Director Black's wondering, well, what are the legalities in this thing, and how much does a state decision have to do with a city's decision is kind of a fundamental question, which is way over my station, but I think there are people who understand these things and could give us some good comment. I just wish I knew a lawyer who would work for free.
There you go. Pro bono.
Yeah.
I had Commissioner Lunt first, and then Commissioner Bell.
Yeah, I just would like a clarification from Director Black. Was the question that Director Black, did you ask whether or not there had been any non-third party interpretation of how the charter relates to Measure 50? Was that your question?
Yeah, that was part of it. The other part was what control and management means, where that starts and where that ends.
It seems like I recall 8-10 years ago that there was that APRC obtained a legal opinion, and it was that state law Measure 50 did supersede the charter. But so is that still, you're saying there's a reason to challenge that at this point?
I'm not saying there's a reason to challenge anything. What I'm saying is I didn't see it as being addressed to the parks commissioners. I read that memo today, and it wasn't addressed to the parks commissioners. And I also, in that memo, which could be 100% correct, there's a lot of information. There's no case law in it or anything like that, so nothing has been tested in the courts at least at the point where the memo was written, which was 2013. Things could have become clearer by then. Between then and now, they may not have changed at all. But one thing I know is that opinions. Well, you know what they say.
Everyone has one. Commissioner Bell, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one last one other statement, which is I think that people get a lot of value for the money that they spend on the Parks and Recreation Commission in Ashland. I think, we provide a huge amount of value to the city and to the people in the city. And I think the idea that our budget should be cut or chipped into bits is extremely short-sighted and just counterproductive to the city. And so, I know that there's people that are advocating strongly for cutting our budget back to nothing, but the Parks and Recreation Commission provides a lot of value to people in Ashland. So I'm going to have to go. So I appreciate your guys' time. Thanks for meeting.
Yeah, thanks a lot for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Okay, thank you, Julian. I don't know that there's really more to say on this topic right now, since it is a study session. We're obviously not going to vote on anything. The intent really wasn't to give staff direction. It was more an opportunity for the commissioners to speak and hash out a few things from the 23rd meeting. And and really upcoming things, but I'd like to hear from Commissioner Wand and then any other commissioners, and maybe just wrap up our discussion on the permanent funding idea, even though we didn't come to any decisions. I think it was a valuable discussion, and I think Director Black has a couple of things that he wanted to add to the meeting. But go ahead, Commissioner Wand.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we shouldn't ask that staff draft some kind of a statement for us to discuss and ratify it at our meeting next week. And the statement that I'm thinking about would be something to say, to state, and this would be to the mayor and the city council. And what it would say in my mind would be that in 10 months, we don't have any certainty about our funding. And that, of course, is not workable. And so that we urge the mayor and city council to continue and support them and continue to work towards completing our funding, and that we make the argument that we've taken our cut, and that any cut should be, if any, should be minimal, and that we think that this is important and that we should be at the table and we should be talking with them rather than them acting unilaterally and without cooperation. So that's kind of an outline, but I think we really should be communicating our stand.
Yeah, I would agree with that too, but I'd like to hear from Commissioner Eldridge. Go ahead.
Well, I think that some of the city councilors have reminded others that we, of course, represent the voters and the community as well. We are also elected officials, and there seems to be some misunderstanding that somehow we don't represent the voters, and especially as like someone who's new here, that just seems patently absurd, because I literally came off the street in my house in Ashland here into this position. So I would love to see that reminded again in the memo as well, that we're a part of this community and we represent the electorate.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Did you want to follow up on that, Mr. Wand?
Yeah, just a little bit. I think we ought to make it clear that, as we've stated before, our focus is on the funding for this biennium as it needs to be so we can function. But that we do understand that there is a long-term issue that also needs to be addressed. And we're more than willing to work on that too, but we need to get our short-term funding in order first.
Right, there's really two issues there. Commissioner Lewis, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for putting together this mailer that came out that I read this afternoon. And I think it touched on several of the issues that we've been discussing tonight. And especially Commissioner Eldridge at the joint meeting brought up the important point of, during the pandemic, how much additional use to the COVID resistant activities. And we hit on that. We explained the East Main Park succinctly once again. And we just basically just explained to whoever's going to pick this up and read it of where we are. It wasn't necessarily political. It is just justifying our existence once again of what we do. And we're here to help the health and well-being of the city. I mean, it's a pretty intrinsic value, but intrinsic things don't have a dollar sign connected to them. And so, you know, we were kind of at a disadvantage in that sense, that of this justification. There's no bottom line to what we do. We tend to give stuff away, which in our world of commercial issues, we're not like a business. You know, we're really not, and we shouldn't be like a business. I think that was brought up at the joint meeting too about, our due diligence of why would we want to do certain things, because it wouldn't be prudent if you were in a business. Well, yeah, it's a good thing we are in a business actually, because we'd have chain link fence around the parks and turnstiles and people having to drop money into it. So, that's ends up the difference between the commercial world and the municipal world. Yeah. So anyway, thank you, everybody. It was an excellent piece of information.
Does, can staff go back on the recording on this and capture those ideas?
Yeah.
Okay. Then, thanks for leading us into that, Commissioner Want, and thanks for your input. The rest of the commissioners, we appreciate that. I think the last thing we were going to cover is Michael Black was going to talk a little about the camping situation.
Yes. Yeah, the camping situation started as a part of the pandemic, as part of the emergency operations group. And it's been going on for quite a while. The camping situation is the camping situation, the car camping that's been authorized in city parks. I'm not talking about any other camping situation besides that. The car camping has been, at one time it was at 3 locations, and it's been reduced down to 1 location. That location will stop being a car camping location as of this weekend, and it will revert back to being a parking lot for the park. So, which it is supposed to be during the day, but there was a lot of the car camping that spilled over from the night and just kind of stayed throughout the days and throughout the weeks and the months. So that will be ending. We do have a process to end that. Yes, I can go back and take a look or listen to the recording and get the information and follow through on what was requested. So
very good. Appreciate that.
And the other thing I was going to say is the quote about the opinions I was thinking of was, there's as many opinions as there is people, and maybe even more, is what I'm saying. And they change from time to time. So it's good. It's always good to relook at these types of things. It may come up with the same information, but it doesn't hurt.
Right. So we might keep that idea warm as something we may want to pursue regarding the charter as well as takeaways from this meeting. Well, commissioners, anything else that individual commissioners would like to bring up that we didn't cover tonight? Thank you for your participation. We'll have a regular agenda for our meeting on September 8th, coming up next Wednesday. And other than that, I appreciate the interaction, and we'll see you next week. Meeting adjourned.
Bye-bye.
Take care.